I remember a few years ago, back when I was discussing anime with someone in the year above mine at my old school, and the discussion itself had turned to what we believed were the worst anime of all time. And the usual that everybody were brought up in this conversation, such as Pupa, Mars of Destruction, Helter Skelter, as well as the then new, recently released second season of Tokyo Ghoul, where Tokyo Ghoul Route A was somehow even worse than the first season. However, as we kept discussing this topic, the other person, let's call him light novel trash lover, because he kept insisting that Infinite Stratos, Charlotte and SAO were not that bad, and even a few times he even came into school fully cosplaying Kirito with the fucking swords and everything. How the hell he was even allowed in the school premises was well beyond me. Then brought up Pingu Pongu the animation as being the worst anime ever made. Both curious and surprised at him saying such a thing, I asked him his reasons why. For at the time I had only seen 2 episodes, and I thought the show was pretty good, and I was also aware of its cult status that it had gained. He then told me that the reasons why Pingu Pongu the animation is the worst anime ever made is because its art and animation is awful. And this little story here sums up the reason why I believe Pingu Pongu the animation is so underlooked in the general sphere of the anime world. Which is a shame too, because they're missing out on one of the greatest anime ever made. Of course, disliking an anime's art style or animation is not inherently a bad thing, but to dismiss the entire show as being bad because you dislike the art design is kinda silly to me. Regardless of such, Pingu Pongu the animation has become one of my favourite anime of all time, and I absolutely adore it. It's a show in which the Pingu Pongu element and the entire sport surrounding it is more so a container into a wonderful character study of its characters, with some fantastic allegorical writing and symbolism brought together and brought to life by Masaki Yusa, who's perhaps one of my favourite auteurs in the entirety of the animated medium. So I've talked for long enough now, let's grab our ping pong bats, taste our blood because you know it tastes like iron, and dive into the strange and creative world that is Pingu Pongu the animation.
ヒーロー剣山ヒーロー剣山ヒーロー剣山そうすりゃオイラがやってくる
Reciting these lines in his mind, one of our main characters, nicknamed Smile, fights on in each and every one of his ping pong matches, along with his friend, nicknamed Pedro. Both boys have essentially grown up together, bonding ever more closely over their shared passion of ping pong. After growing older and reaching high school, both begin to eventually play in tournament matches. The show sees them both grow, not only in their ping pong abilities and skills, but also more so as people as well, as they influence the other players who go against them, who, in turn, also have their own mental hang-ups. Ping pong's narrative, if anything, will not surprise you with any grand plot twists, and is, at its most fundamental level, a standard sports narrative. However, what makes the show shine so much is its well-developed cast of characters, symbolism, and amazing directing. Another thing that helps make ping pong so much fun to watch from an entertainment perspective alone is how well paced the entire show actually is. The narrative is always pushing forward in some way, introducing new plot threads and mental dilemmas for its characters, while also wrapping up several older ones at the same time, keeping the anime fresh and interesting. Another thing that makes the otherwise standard story so great is how attached we become to both Peto and Smile as characters, generating intrigue from the audience, and many of the ping pong matches are exciting to watch, since the narrative does a good job at creating narrative stakes and tension. The best example of this is probably the match between Wen and Kazuma, where if Wen loses this match, he would not be able to return to his home country of China, which makes the preceding absolute beatdown of his character in the match all the more desperate and emotional. The entire show is just very tightly written, with visual symbolism and motifs, as well as developed themes and ideas, used in many cases in order to convey more about the characters and what they are feeling, without the use of dialogues to masterful effect, which I'll be getting more into in a moment. The crux of the show, however, is the relationship between both Peto and Smile, and how each of them develops throughout the course of the show. What's particularly interesting about their relationship is the juxtaposition of their personalities. Peto is rather upbeat, cocky, and is highly motivated to become the best in ping pong, while Smile is much more quiet and is referred to as being a robot with no emotions by his peers, and the people who go against him in matches. In fact, his name, Smile, was given to him due to the fact that he rarely smiles, which we learn later was actually given to him by Peto, after we see how much Peto saw him enjoying ping pong as a child. Each character is given enough time for fleshing out their characters, and each respective character arc is interesting to watch play out. Smile's character is all about learning how to enjoy the game of ping pong once again, and to break away from the robotic playstyle and mode he has been using for many years now. So, in other words, Petro is Smile's hero, the salvation he needs to enjoy the sport he holds so dearly once again, which results in some fantastic cathartic payoff at the end of the series. The motif of the hero, as well as the idea of flight, is a consistent theme in ping pong, and is often used to convey how the characters are feeling too, with the depiction of the hero with wings being the representation of Petro. During the final match between Petro and Smile, as Smile begins to break free from his robotic playstyle, we see an image of a bird flying freely through the sky, representative of Smile's newly gained freedom. Petro's energetic style and massive love for ping pong ends up being a salvation for other players too, in particular to Kazuma, who has devoted his entire life to a very strict training regimen in order to win at ping pong and to further his career. However, his constant winning also leaves him isolated and secluded, as he frequently finds comfort in hiding in the bathrooms before playing a game. In the penultimate episode of the show, we see a visual imagery of the hero, in other words Petro, extend a hand to Kazuma, before taking it back and smiling at him. Kazuma then draws wings himself and flies after the hero, looking down at the bathroom he used to hide himself in, signaling that his character has indeed grown, and is now able to enjoy ping pong once again, reflected in his changed attitude in the game he is playing. More evidence that Petro is indeed Smile's hero comes from the line, "Iron tastes like blood," which I referenced a little earlier in this review. The idea is that blood and iron are two juxtaposing elements, both representative of the contrast in personalities between the two characters. Blood is something that is alive, something that is moving, representing life, linking into the idea that Petro is a hero and plays ping pong because he loves it, while the iron, which is associated as being cold and metallic, is representative of Smile's character and playstyle. The idea that Petro tells Smile that iron tastes like blood could be seen that Petro is trying to make Smile see that he is more human than Smile, and everyone else believes. Another piece of symbolism used to contrast their personalities is the use of a star and the moon, both typically found on each respective person's item of clothing or on their ping pong bats. The star is used to represent Petro, always full of life and shining brilliantly, illuminating everyone around him, fitting into the hero motif, while the moon is used to represent Smile, an object that has two sides of it, the dark side and the light side, representing the change that is going to take place in his character. Some clever visual imagery is used in regards to Petro's character when he throws his bat into the river, which has a star symbol on it, signifying that Petro's light and his ambition is now no more. And there are plenty of these visual motifs in the show, all of which are used to showcase or add on to characterization, making for some of the most interesting characters I've seen in any show before, most of whom are quite relatable, which drives the emotional weight of these characters even more. Each theme and motif in ping pong is integrated into the narrative in order for us to learn more about the characters, from the motif of the butterfly in regards to Smile's coach, Kozumi, to the idea of hard work being crushed under the weight of natural talent in the case of Sakuma in his match against Smile. Each idea is implemented well into the story and given enough time to breathe and develop too, which is masterful writing in my eyes. Ping Pong has also one of my all-time favourite soundtracks, with each track fitting perfectly the theme and personality of each character in question. The opening is fucking great and never fails to get me pumped up, while, at the same time, sprinkling in some lyrics relating to the motif of flying in the show. Petro's theme is fast-paced, frantic and fun, mirroring his character and the motif of a hero, and is used to fantastic effect during his match with Kazuma. In contrast, Kazuma's theme is foreboding and powerful, representing Kazuma's strength, which is used amazingly during his match with Wen, which I briefly touched upon before. I'd also like to use this match as a jumping board and as an example of how great and imaginative the animation can be at times too. As previously mentioned, this match has a lot of narrative stakes, since this is the final chance for Wen to get back to China after being kicked off the Chinese team. So as an audience, we sympathise with him more and want him to succeed. However, what follows is an utter hopeless beatdown, and the entire match feels so helpless. Just as much as Wen is feeling absolutely desperate and pushed into a corner, so do we as an audience member, and the anime conveys this feeling of helplessness with fantastic visuals of Kazuma towering over Wen, signifying the difference in skills and talent, as the ping pong table itself stretches out, emphasizing this idea. Not only that, but every time Kazuma hits the ball, a streak of purple lightning is used to convey the power and lightning fast reflexes Kazuma retains. In addition, we also see him depicted as being a giant, again referencing his raw strength, but also the color used is important as well. In the show, the color purple is used to represent those people who are respected in the world of Pingu Pongu, as both teachers of Petal and Smile frequently wear shirts and some shades of purple, and the highly influential academy Kazuma attends is also largely purple as well. Taking the idea of purple and applying it into this situation makes for an interesting idea when we see Kazuma transform into a giant purple dragon. Dragons are typically associated with Chinese culture, the place where Wen is trying to get back to, and having Kazuma transform into a dragon is symbolic of Wen's attempt to get back into the team, who turned him away. The entire show is loaded with this much visual imagery and creative metaphors, and is so insanely dense that it would be impossible to talk about all of it, which is what makes the show so insanely well crafted and interesting to watch for anyone who loves creative animation and symbolism. The animation as a whole is incredibly fluid and at times rather bouncy and energetic. I also love the art style too, albeit if it can sometimes feel a little jarring or wonky at times. It was never enough to pull me out of the overall experience, so I have no issues with the animation or art style at all. And in fact, I'd argue that it overall helps the anime since it gives it a unique sense of style and personality. When it comes down to it, Pingu Pongu is a hard series to summarize and talk about because of how dense and how well constructed everything is. I could go on forever about what I personally think the show is trying to say and what each element represents, but I believe part of the fun of the show is trying to piece and make sense of everything for yourself. And if there is anything of what I said you think is misinterpreted or just flat out wrong, please feel free to tell me. After all this analysis here is just from my puny little mind. Pingu Pongu animation is a marvel, a great example of what can be accomplished in animation, and a true testament that a simple idea can become a wonderful show. Its characters are all very well developed, and the allegorical meaning behind what each of them represents are interesting. The music is fantastic, and overall this is one of the best experiences I've ever had with any show ever. With all that said and done, thank you for taking the time to watch my review, and I'll leave you with my favourite quote from the show.